Hi everyone, Clayton Davis here, film awards editor at Variety, here today, having a special conversation as part of the Miami Film Festival Gems 2020, where Farewell Amor is having its Florida premiere. And I'm here today with Ekwa Msangi. How you doing, Ekwa?
I'm pleased to be here. Nice to
Uh,
meet you, Clayton.
Did I pronounce your last name right? I don't want to I've been
Msangi.
I'm very big on making sure I say people's names right, and it
I
will
appreciate
I'll be offended personally for myself.
No problem.
So, first of all, congratulations on
Thank
such
you.
a beautiful, beautiful movie.
Thank
So
you.
good. Ah,
Thank you so much.
and I say this. I don't say this to every first time director, so I'm going to say it to you.
Okay.
I said it to a few this year because this year seems to be a trend. But
Uh,
I say to myself, if this is your first movie, I I'm scared for when they let you off the reins and you get to really make something you want to like what what how did this birth? I know it was a short film before. Give us the roadmap. How do we get here?
yeah, thank you so much. So this is a story that is inspired by the relationship of an aunt and uncle of mine who were married in the mid 90s. Uncle got a student visa to the US, left, came to the US, had every intention of bringing wife and 5-month old at the time right behind him, and till today are still petitioning for visas, still hopeful. He calls every week, he sends money, she's built a house, my cousin's in college now, but here they are, and so it was kind of the what if story. What if auntie finally got her visa and she's able to come? Where does one begin? And over the years I had, I mean, it's our family, so we've been tracking this story forever. Of course, a lot of different family members have different feelings about whether they should stay together or not and what should have happened or not happened.
Family has
But
opinions on stuff. What
yeah,
crazy?
right? Crazy.
Go ahead.
But it's just so I've seen how it's changed them as individuals, because I've seen my uncle in the US, I've seen my auntie in Tanzania, and my cousin, and then just also who they've had to become in order to stay hopeful. So that was kind of where it sparked from. And knowing that we wanted to do the feature, we decided to start with a short as like a proof of concept, because as Black independent female filmmakers talking about stories about Africans, immigrants, that's not issue driven or the most exceptional African that ever existed driven kind of story. It's been really hard to get funding. And so we decided, that was one of the reasons I decided to talk about people in the diaspora and make it like a US based film. But we started with a short as a way to sort of gain support and gain excitement around the film. So we shot this short in 2016, and then from there used that and the script to raise money for the feature.
So this when you created the short, was the full script already created? Did you already
Not at
have it?
all. Not in the least. I just had the idea, and really all I had as far as the idea was, by the time I was doing the short, was this image of my uncle at the airport, at the gate, waiting for his family to show up, and all the feelings. And like, would he recognize them? What would he say? Do they embrace?
Because he hasn't been. I'm sorry, he hasn't been back to
He hasn't
Africa
been back.
since. Okay.
Yeah. And so are they shaking hands? Are they hugging? Like, well, where do you go from there? It was kind of, that was like the one image that I kind of held on to. And being a foreigner and having witnessed, for like airports for foreigners is just like, it's a whole other experience. I remember I've been to Cuba several times, and going to the airport in Cuba is just like, it's such an experience because there's so much when people arrive at that airport. It's like years and decades of being apart, and all of the birthdays and the somebody died and I wasn't there, and just like all of the regrets and the this and the that. And I think that's true for a lot of immigrants who managed to raise the money to travel, who managed to raise the money to come back, you know, whatever the case is. It's like such a pivotal moment. But, you know, and so for this family, it kind of feels like, yay, we made it, end the story. But it's actually the beginning of the story for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and there's something that someone had told me a long time ago. I have to check. A writer I used to write with a long time ago, and I didn't study film in college, so I'm learning a lot of this, obviously, like
Right.
as an adult, as a lot of people are. But what I love so much, your DP, Bruce Francis Cole,
Yes.
um, and very, very talented. And someone told me once before that the way Black people are depicted in film is, oh, like in terms of the positive and and wide scope of who they are as people, is always contingent on the DP, because it's about light, the way they light the Black experience, how
Yeah.
like you highlight the smiles and the skin and all those things that I never really thought about until I remember the first time it came up was during 12 Years a Slave. Sean Bobbitt
Yeah.
was branded, and this was a white colleague of mine that told me this. Said Sean
Yeah.
Bobbitt knows how to light Black skin. And I remember thinking at the time, like, what does that even mean? And then I
That's,
got it, and then I thought of it now with this movie. How did that factor into like the African experience is separate in terms of the way Americans think of it than the African American experience, Black people that were brought here as slaves. These are two different stories. Did that factor in about their depiction?
um, I mean, I did go to film school, and so it's the kind of thing that, at least amongst the Black kids, we talk about in film school all the time, because you have all these DPs in training who want to shoot your films to get practice, and it's like lighting, you know. And I learned on celluloid, so like lighting is like a whole thing with the gels and the light meter, and you know, as opposed to, you know, with digital cameras and all of the kind of coloring that we do. I mean, I sat with Bruce when we colored this film, and one of the kids who had kind of been on training on our film came, and we were trying to explain to him what it was like to learn, like to color film on celluloid. Like you know, you can make a whole new film right now in digital because of all the things that you can do with digital, but on celluloid you have like three choices kind of. So you have to do a lot of that lighting on the set. And
Yeah.
Bruce is a person who learned on celluloid, and so he learned old school for one. Bruce is also one of those people. I mean, everyone who came to this project came in some sort of magical way, and he was definitely like witness to that, because we were initially supposed to work with somebody else, and then they got pulled off and did, you know, and they were kind of like, you should talk to my friend Bruce. And we saw his reel and we're like, why have we never heard of this person before? Like, this reel is too good to be somebody who's just been out here all this time and we've never heard of him. And he's, you know, similar to what you said at the top of our talk here, is like, he's a person who I'm just like, I can't wait to see like Bruce Unhinged and like what that will be like. But we did talk a lot about how we wanted to show them, aside from just like the skin and what their skin looks like, their features, but you know, like really using the camera as sort of like another eye, in a way, I could say, I guess. So we had different influences that we were referring to for each character, you know, how we wanted to depict them. The father, you know, we were thinking of like kind of slow cinema. He used a lot of examples from a lot of Asian cinema references, and, you know, wider shots where the father's kind of caught between doorways or caught between window frames or two surfaces. So he's kind of stuck. The daughter, you know, she's kind of young and hip and active. And so we had a lot of moving camera for her, handheld. And so
Do you have those boots anywhere that you're rocking? Because those boots, man.
those are good boots. Yeah.
I watch it with my wife, and I was like, I want to buy those boots for my daughter. I know she can't pull it off though. She's 9, but I kind of want to just try it and just throw it at her.
And buy them and just keep them for
Yeah,
the future.
and I'm gonna tell her to go do step because my wife, we're trying to get, she's in her early givings of learning like rhythm
Good,
and stuff right now.
good,
So
good.
try to get with it. All right.
It's a great starting place.
Yeah.
That was our costume department. They
Oh,
found those boots and they're
fantastic.
amazing. But yeah, and then for Esther, we wanted, for her, she's at home, she's paying attention to all the details, she's sort of trying to figure out what's been happening here. So a lot of close, lens, 50 millimeter lenses, where we're kind of focusing in on a lot of the details that she would be observing. And so trying to kind of also keep it interesting and be in the mind of, be in the perspective of those characters as we're experiencing them.
Oh, okay, awesome. What I also love about it, and this is coming from someone, I mean, I'm half Puerto Rican, half Black. This, you can almost pluck it into any immigrant story, and like, in a lot of ways of what the immigrant experience is. I mean, immigrants are getting painted very, very poorly in the United States nowadays, and on how we assimilate or don't, or choose not to assimilate. This is a story of us all. Not doesn't necessarily have to be the detail, but just like the sacrifices we make to have a better life.
Yeah.
What do you want someone who's not in, I'll say this slightly, they're not an immigrant in the sense that they think they're immigrants, because we all are immigrants unless you're indigenous, yes. But we won't go there. But like, what would you want someone to take from this that maybe doesn't know the immigrant story, or they're riding around in a cab and they're just a cab driver to them? What do you want them to get?
Just the humanity. Like, really, the long and short of it is just like really having a chance to think about the humanity of the people that you're interacting with, because we interact with immigrants all the time, whether we know it or not. Not all immigrants are people of color. There's plenty of European immigrants too, and they have a lot of the same stories as well. And really what it boils down to, I feel the very same way in terms of like the way in which immigrants have been depicted in the news is as like takers and people who are just taking all our resources, and oh my God, there's such a burden, and all that kind of stuff. And we never get to understand, it's either that they're takers and they're a burden, or yay for us because we saved them from this war-torn, horrible situation, and like pat on the back for us. Exactly.
Yeah.
But we never really think about what people have had to give up in order to be here. For some people, it's a choice. For a lot of people, it's not really a choice, because if you go and like mess up my country and my economy and make it so that my government actually can't hire anybody because they're paying all the GDP to the World Bank or whatever, then I have to come abroad to look for work. Guess where I'm coming, and nobody prefers to leave everybody that they love and everything that they know to go live in some foreign land and struggle. Most cab drivers, I live in New York, most cab drivers are doctors and lawyers and architects, and they're professional people who have to do this to make a living. But it's not
come here to drive a cab. I think people put too much. They think it's like so easy and just like, right. Oh yeah, they came here. Of course, why wouldn't they want to come here? It's America. Not realizing like
so much better to drive a cab.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's not.
It's not cool.
It's not.
Yeah.
I'm doing it, and yes, it's earning me money and I'm supporting my family and all of these things. But if I had a choice and I was able to just be at home with my loved ones, I would be at home with my loved ones, And so not thinking about, we never get to really think about what people give up in order to be immigrants in our country, or also just like what they bring. like what immigrants bring to the table, bring to American fabric that make us all better people, and not just labor wise, but culture, music, food, just like everything, there's just so much, even expertise, labor is not just like physical labor, people picking lettuce, but the doctors and the technicians and the, Silicon Valley people, like those are all pretty much like 99% immigrants.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, trouble that idea of who immigrants are and what their purpose is.
Awesome. Let's talk about this cast.
Yeah.
Like Walter, Esther, and Sylvia, especially. Yeah. Like, where did you find them? How they get into this? And are they on loan from God? Or were they just here for a little while? What's going on? How do we get them?
You are correct.
Yeah.
Like I said, everything was really, really magical. I do mean that. Ntare, who plays Walter, is a friend. He's a filmmaker, and we met on the road. We've had our films play in festivals together in the past, our short films.
You kept reminding me of Rob Morgan. I just kept like looking at him, like I almost thought it was Rob Morgan at first. Like he just reminds me of him. Go ahead.
He's phenomenal. Yeah. He's also a fellow East African. He's from Uganda. My family's from Tanzania. I grew up in Kenya. And so, we've had that in common, and we've been threatening to work together for years. And so it finally came up. I actually had wanted him to work on the short. It didn't work out, but it did work out for the feature. And so I was so honored that he was available, and just everything that he brought he was incredible. He brought so much. Both Esther and Sylvia, so Zainab Jam and Jamie Lawson, came through casting. Zainab, I've known her, she's very big in the New York theater scene. Mm-hmm. She does a lot of theater work and is incredible. I've seen her on stage. And I've just kind of, we bumped into each other at little film parties here and there, but I didn't know her. So she came and auditioned, she did a read for us, and she was the one person who was able to really get the full breadth of the character, all the nuances and things like that. And Jamie as well. Jamie, when we saw her in casting, we had started by casting Sylvia because we needed somebody older who could play younger, somebody who could dance, someone who could do the accents, just like all of these different things. And we weren't sure where we were going to find that unicorn. And she had just graduated from Juilliard. So this was her absolute first project. She was so adorable. She was so hardworking. And then, we cast her and we did a bit of rehearsal. And then like right before we started shooting, she was like, "Can I ask you some questions?" And I was like, "Sure." And she's like, "This is my first production, so I just want to make sure I'm ready. Are you going to feed me, or should I bring my own food?" I was like, "I will feed you, honey." I love you, and I will feed. That's the least that I can do, is to give you some food. And she was like, "Okay." I didn't know what to expect because I've never been on a set before, and
the innocence of youth before Hollywood clutches gets in them, just ruins them forever. Jamie Lawson's amazing. My God. Esther's character, my God. So I had an old girlfriend who was African, and it was PTSD. I saw her mother in Esther. Like I was like, oh my God, this is like to the T of what I experienced at the time. She like nails every ounce of what's going on there.
Yeah, she did an incredible job, and I'm so grateful to her for, and Zainab was like one hit wonder. We would do a take and then we just do another one because as responsible filmmakers we should.
Yeah.
And she would be like joking and laughing and doing all these things, and then like
turn it off
character and just be Esther.
Yeah.
And it was great. I mean, we did do a lot of work together, the three of them. I mean, aside from, they had many hours of dance training, they had many hours of dialect training. But as far as their relationship, I didn't want them to read much of the script together.
Oh, okay.
Because the idea is they don't know each other, and I wanted that to
Be
be
strangers.
as like strained as possible. And so we just did a lot of back work. We just did a lot of sort of improv-y type things about, the first time that Sylvia came home late and Esther calls Walter and she's upset about it, or Sylvia got her period and what do we do, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That the kinds of conversations that they would have had on the phone. The first time the visa was rejected, the second time the visa was rejected, and all of those kinds of things, so that they could have the backstory, they could have the muscle memory of the backstory,
Yeah.
and then bring that to the set. And they did an amazing job. So,
Have you shown the film to your uncle and aunt?
no.
No. Are you nervous? Are you nervous too?
Only because a little bit nervous, yes, and only because I don't actually think that my uncle has ever had an affair, and so I don't want him to think
That you think
that
he did.
I'm like telling the world that he,
I'm telling on you. Snitches get stitches. You're about to
right,
get in
or
trouble.
making my auntie nervous because she's like, "What do you know that I don't?" You know. I mean,
Have you
I
told
changed.
them that part is in it, though, at least?
Well, like I said, the story is
Oh, you gotta get that
inspired.
part out. I know. We gotta let them know at least that it's out there, just so it doesn't happen in like.
They have, at least my aunt knows that I made a story that was inspired by their separation.
Got it. Okay.
My family, or at least that part of the family, is a little more interested in like Nollywood type films. So
Okay.
I doubt they would see this on their own. And like I
Okay.
said, I don't want to inspire doubt or grief or
Yeah,
suspicion.
we'll do. All right.
So I made them
I won't
Angolan.
tell them. All right. Next family gets to there. I'll just keep it. I'll keep it between you and
They're not ready yet.
I. My last big question for you. I mean, it is elephant in the room. You talked on it briefly at the beginning about funding. I mean, this woman's all about Black woman power, like behind and in front. But I'm gonna focus on the behind part. I mean, you're coming in here, writing, directing your own movie. I literally just did a cover story with Spike Lee at Variety when I asked them about Black representation in the Academy, because I follow the Academy Awards. It's only been 6 Black men nominated for director since John Singleton in '91, but no Black women. And Ava DuVernay's alive, Dee Reese is alive and well, making movies.
By the wood, yeah.
Phenomenal directors.
Yeah.
But they get passed over. I asked Spike Lee about it, and he said, Black women always have it tougher. Why would it be any different in film? Mm-hmm. And it sounded harsh at first. I was like, oh my God. But then I was like, well, I mean, yeah. Like, yeah. So talk about coming in here as an African, making a movie, I mean, about the African experience, and then just being able to helm your own picture.
I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible because it's been something that I've worked on for decades, since film school. And even in film school, when I was trying to tell stories about Africans, I would constantly get that's not what Africans are like, and that's not what they look like, and are you sure that's what, and or just kind of like,
sure, African lady, that the Africans are like that?
I've never seen that. I don't know what you're talking about, and so, and it was very frustrating. I mean, when I got to my final year in film school, I was pretty much, I knew that I wasn't going to be a filmmaker, because it was just like, I couldn't get any traction. Nobody understood what I was talking about. And this was pre-digital, pre-Nollywood, pre-people actually seeing images and stories.
How long ago did you finish film school?
I finished undergrad 2002, and finished undergrad 2002. my final year, I took a class, one of the professors in Africana Studies gave a class on African cinema. And that literally just changed my life because it was like, oh, first of all, there've been like thousands, like dozens of people who've been working on this and making multiple movies. They
Mm-hmm.
just haven't, they don't necessarily show on American TV, you know? And
Yeah.
so, all right, different crowd. So it just, what it did for me was it told me that I was just talking to the wrong audience. And so I changed my focus. I did a master's to study African cinema because I thought it would be important to know, you know, the other African or Black filmmakers other than Spike Lee. I went to NYU, so of course everyone's
Yeah.
like, oh, Spike Lee. And it's like, yes, Spike Lee is amazing. He definitely was an influence for me to come to film school in the
There are
first place.
more.
There are so many more.
Yeah.
We don't all make films like Spike Lee. We don't, you know, we have other things we're talking about as well. And so I studied that, finished 2004, and have spent most of my time making films or focusing. My audience has been an African film audience, you know, and those are the festivals, these regional festivals and things that I've been to. With technology, with YouTube, with all these other things, things have expanded quite a bit. So there's a whole lot more people who are making films and making images, and there's, you know, so there's a bit more of a quorum now than when I first started in film school, you know, in the early 2000s, which is fantastic. Um, so getting here and getting funding for my film is incredible. It's incredible. And I loved my producers, investors. They were all just like wonderful, wonderful people. And they took a risk because, you know, it's not something that they're familiar with. It's not something that they'd seen before. And so they were definitely just kind of trusting in me and trusting in my producer. It was harder to sell the film. That took a while. I mean, it's also 2020 and the year that it's been. Um, and you know, it's so it's all the steps. It's like selling the film. Now we've sold the film, yay, and you know, we're partnered with people who really love it. And now we're like working together with them, and they've been really great in understanding like we need to work together in marketing this film because you are talking to an audience that you probably don't normally talk to. Nobody's bad for that. It's nobody's
Yeah.
fault. It just is what it is. You know, we're taking baby steps here, and so they've been great, and we're, you know, crafting the trailers together and the posters and this and the that. But I do expect that it will be, I don't think I'm just gonna be zooming up the mountain from now on. I do think it's still going to take some time. I think I'm certainly in a better place than I was even 5 or 10 years ago. You know, for most Black films across the board, whether you're African or not, you know, everyone wants a celebrity, a recognizable star. And when I say recognizable, it depends on who's recognizing, because people that I recognize are not necessarily people that Hollywood recognizes. And for me, who's interested in people who can bring some sort of authenticity to the characters, I'm very lucky because a lot of the A-listers are actually of African descent or African heritage. And so, yay for me. So I do think it's a great time for me. You know, there's definitely timing that's come that's made it different for me than it was for even Dee Reese, you know, because she came out well ahead of her time, given what Hollywood was ready to deal with, accept, look at. And thankfully, she's like hung in there and has worked really hard to keep her name in the ring, but it's not the kinds of films that people expect us, the
Yeah.
stories that they expect us to tell, and all of those kinds of things are, you know, it's still a challenge.
Well, I hope you zoom up the mountain. You deserve to.
Thank you.
For everyone watching, Farewell Amor is distributed by IFC Films. And it's going to hit theaters and VOD on December 11th. So make sure not only that you watch again, if you're watching this, tell your friends to watch it. And I think it's accessible for everyone. So everyone should give it a shot. Expand their cinematic palettes, as I like to say. Let it
Yes.
mature. All right. I'm Clayton Davis here with Ekwa. Ekwa, thank you for joining. You are an angel here on earth as well. And we look forward to everything you have to offer. All right, enjoy the rest of the festival.